Adventurers, attention! Fall in for Adventure Parade! The Mutual Broadcasting System cordially invites all adventurers from 6 to 60 to join in its parade of the world's most famous stories. Stories of action, mystery, and adventure. And here is your host and storyteller, the leader of Adventure Parade, Roger Elliott.
Thank you, George Hogan, and hello, adventurers. Today we continue with the third in our series of true animal adventure stories. You remember we're bringing you this series as a tribute to a wonderful organization. But for the sake of any new listeners, George, will you carry on?
Well, this is National Boy Scout Week. They're celebrating their 37th birthday. And the writer of the stories, Ernest Thompson Seton, was one of the founders of the Boy Scouts. As a matter of fact, Mr. Seton was Chief Scout for 5 years.
Besides being a fine writer, too. It's a real pleasure to pay tribute to the Boy Scouts of America by bringing you his delightful animal stories.
What's our story about today, Roger?
Today's story is about a bear, the Coalie Creek bear, and his feud with the hero of the tale, a razor-backed hog. And now for the third of Ernest Thompson Seton's true animal stories, the story of Foam, a razor-backed hog. His mother was just an ordinary razor-backed hog in the woods of South Virginia. Long-legged and long-snouted, strong in shoulder, hard and tight in flanks, and equipped with sharp white tusks that were enough to inspire terror in any dog that dared to try her. She roamed in the glades by Prunty's farm during summer, and when winter food was scarce, she knew a half-hearted allegiance to the Prunty barnyard. There one morning, a brood of cowering, pink-nosed piglets crowded against her, looking suspiciously at the world outside. Among them was one staunch rollicker, who got his name because the sight of danger brought his bristles up, so he chopped his little fox-like jaws till they foamed, and therefore he was named Foamy Chops, or Foam. Now, Lizette Prunty had wandered one day to Coalie Creek for June strawberries, and she kept going further on until she heard suddenly a loud sniff-sniff. The brushwood swayed, and out stepped a huge black bear. Poor Lizette was terror-stricken. She could neither move nor run. She simply stood and gazed, and so did the bear, snarling a little. Then the tall grass parted again, and the old razorback mother and her lively brood pushed out. The black monster dropped on all fours and charged the mother and her brood. The fierce war grunts of the mother might have struck terror into any but the bear, for the razorback had mighty jaws and sturdy legs. She had backed into a protecting bush, making only a head-on attack possible, and the bear growled menacingly as he walked this way and that, with the mother's champing jaws aimed however he went. Then he began a short charge and stopped. The mother made her mistake. She charged, ripped his arm, and bit his paw. But he was on her, stunning her with a terrible blow and raking her sides. He gripped her in a fierce embrace that robbed her of fighting breath. And as they closed, Lizette turned and fled for home. Lizette flew to her father and told him what was happening at Coalie Creek, and they started out together with dog and gun. But turkey buzzards were sailing over the place as they drew near. They found the old razorback dead and her limp brood scattered along the creek bank. Lizette began to cry, but suddenly the dog broke into a tirade at something far under the bushes. And there, bravely facing him, stood a little red-headed piglet, chopping with his tiny jaws until the foam flew. Poor little Foamy Chops. He was so hungry, so forlorn, and his nose was so sore where the bear had scratched him. He didn't even know that Lizette was his friend, and he champed his little jaws defiantly when she put him in a box beside the kitchen stove. She washed his wounded nose while he crouched in dull, motionless despair. Then she brought him a warm bottle, and he could no more help sucking than any baby could. When the bottle was empty, he slept the long, sweet sleep he so much needed. Before his tail began to curl, Foam learned that Lizette meant food. Next he found that he could bring Lizette, that is food, if he squealed. And thenceforth his daily practice developed a mighty voice. And so he grew out of his box and into a runway, and became so frisky that he was allowed to run free, coming when Lizette whistled, racing across the garden, or out of sheer caprice, hiding and watching her search for him. One day, Lizette was blacking her shoes with some wonderful polish that dried quite shiny. Foam had tried in vain to get her attention. He'd tumbled a lamb on its side, he'd scared chickens, and run around Lizette. At last, he raised himself on both hind legs and put his front feet on the chair beside Lizette's foot, grunting as if to say, "Please give me some." And so she painted his front feet with the blacking, which dried in a minute, and Foam's pale pink hoofs were made a splendid shining black. The operation had been pleasantly ticklesome, and Foam blinked his eyes but didn't move till it was over. Then he gravely smelled his right foot and his left foot and grunted again. Thereafter, whenever Lizette got out the brush and blacking, Foam was there to sniff the queer smell and offer his feet for treatment. There were two companions in Foam's life, a duck and a lamb, strange creatures that Foam inspected narrowly out of his white-rimmed eyes with distrust and a little jealousy. But they proved pleasant people to sleep with. They kept him so warm. And soon he devised ways of enjoying them as playthings. The lamb's tail was long and pullable, and the duck could be tossed over his shoulder by a well-timed root. Now, there are rogues among elephants, idlers among beavers, mangy man-eaters among tigers, and there are outlaws among bears. Creatures at war with all the world, making themselves known by their evil deeds and finding pleasure in destruction. The Coager's Creek Bear was one of these. He wandered about doing all the mischief he could, smashing down fences, little sheds, or field crops that he couldn't eat for the pleasure of destroying. But his main taste was for flesh. Calf's flesh he loved, but he wouldn't dream of facing a cow. He delighted in robbing birds' nests. He'd work half a day to get at a family of flying squirrels. But his favorite food was pork. A wonderfully keen nose had the Coager's Bear. He wasn't far from Prunty's when the soft breeze rippling through the dawn woods brought him the sweet, alluring smell of pig. And he followed it, swinging his black head as he sifted out the invisible trail from the others on the wind. Marvelously silent was the bear when going through the woods, and Coager's Bear reached the Prunty's swiftly and noiselessly, led at last to the little paddock where Foam was sleeping with his head across the woolly back of the lamb. The bear surveyed the fence, and finding no opening, proceeded to climb over. But it wasn't meant for such a hulk of flesh. The paling swayed, yielded, fell, and the bear was in the paddock. If Foam had been slower or the lamb had been quicker, everything would have been different. The bear rushed forward. Foam darted aside. The lamb sat still. A heavy blow from the bear's paw put an end to its ever moving again, just as Foam disappeared through the hole in the fence. The noise had roused the household. Prunty went out with his gun and dogs, with Lizette whistling for Foam. They found the body of the lamb far back on the trace, but of Foam there was no trace. Lizette's playmate was gone. The Razorback who'd played round her like a puppy who weighed 150 pounds. But he was really reviving the wild ways of his ancestors, long lost in sodden prison pens. Foam had gone back to the woods. It's a long, dusty road from Dan River Bridge to Mayo Valley by Coager's Creek. Yet down its whole length there trotted one day a sleek young Razorback. She was barely full-grown, shaped in body and limbs like a deer, and clad in a close coat of glistening grizzly hair that flashed in the sun. Down the long pike she trotted, swinging her sensitive nose, cocking her ears this way and that, making a careful smell study of posts that edged her trail. She stopped at many a crossroad, and she studied many a breeze, but she kept on trotting until evening saw her in the woods that lie beyond the lower bridge of Coager's Creek. She paused there at Foam's scratching post, and as she stood, Foam charged out of the woods, gold-red mane bristling. The gray Razorback, Griselle, hadn't known until he stood there what had brought her along the trail, but she knew now that she'd found it. And so the woods around Coager's Creek soon sounded with the eager talk and the busy hoofs of Griselle's brood. And the smallest, little Runty, failing to follow closely one day, fell to the Coager's Creek Bear, so that the bear took to following the family at a safe distance. It was on one such day that Foam heard a high-pitched squeal of terror in the bushes to one side, and his eyes turned green with rage. He lunged through the bushes. There, black and fierce, was a bear standing half out in the open. Foam faced him fiercely, and behind and beside Foam was a smaller razorback, Rizal. The others of the brood were hidden in the near thicket of alders. The bear strode in a circle toward them, but Foam swung round, so they stood and faced each other. There was just a little curl of snarl upon the scabby nose of the Coalie Creek bear, and the hog, high standing on his wide-braced legs, made bigger by the standing mane on his crested back, his snout held low, his twinkling eyes alert, his great tusks gleaming, and his jaws going chop-chop till the foam that gave him his baby name was flecked on the massive jowl. The bear made the charge, and Foam darted out. Thud, thud, thud went the huge claws, and deep, short gasps of effort came. The blows staggered but didn't down Foam, and his white knives flashed with upward slash the stroke that seeks the vitals. They reeled apart. The hog was bruised, but the bear had half a dozen bleeding rips. Again they closed, and the bear flung all his bulk on Foam, trying to throw him by his weight. But Foam was stout and ripped at the soggy belly till the bear flinched, curled, and shrank in pain. Again they faced and closed. The bear sprang on Foam's back, heaving down with all his might. Slash went those long, keen ivory knives, but Foam was going down. And then another struck the bear. Rizal was on him with all her force. The bear lurched back. She seized his hinder paw and crunched. Foam heaved the monster from his back and turned and slashed and tore. So the bear went down at last with two like demons tearing, rending, carving. He clutched a standing branch, but they dragged him down and knived and heaved until the gull screams died. All movement ceased, and the Coger's bear was a bloody, muddy mass. But Foam came quickly to himself, turned wholly calm, and the little pigs came out fearfully to root at the fallen foe, rushing away in fright at a fancied sign of life, while Griselle came close to Foam and then called her brood away. They rollicked off together, Foam last of all, with strength unspent and head held high. And so ends the third of our true adventure tales by Ernest Thompson Seton, famous naturalist, writer, and grand old man of the Boy Scouts of America.
I keep wanting the stories to go on, Roger. You know, I'd like to know what Foam does next.
Well, I guess that's the best test of a good story, George. And you'll be just as interested in tomorrow's story, A Wolf Who Was a King. Lobo, King of the Karumpaw. Until then, so long.
So long, Roger. We'll all be listening tomorrow, same time, same station, for another true story by Ernest Thompson Seton on Mutual's Adventure Parade. Roger Elliott leads the Adventure Parade at this same time over many of these Mutual stations every weekday afternoon, Monday through Friday. Be sure to listen for the world's most famous stories of action, mystery, and adventure on Adventure Parade. Roger Elliott is also your host at the House of Mystery, heard on most of these Mutual stations each Sunday afternoon. Adventure Parade is produced and directed by Robert and Jessica Maxwell. Music is composed and played by John Garth. Ernest Thompson Seton's story for today is adapted for Adventure Parade by Anne Lawrence. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System. Adventurers, attention! Fall in for Adventure Parade! The Mutual Broadcasting System cordially invites all adventurers from 6 to 60 to join in its parade of the world's most famous stories. Stories of action, mystery, and adventure. And here is your host and storyteller, the leader of Adventure Parade, Roger Elliott.
Thank you, George Hogan, and hello, adventurers. This week, we're going to try something new on Adventure Parade.
Instead of telling a story in 5 chapters, I'm going to tell you 5 individual stories by the same author, the late Ernest Thompson Seton, one of the founders of the Boy Scouts of America. As many of you know, this is Boy Scout Week, and Adventure Parade takes this way of observing the 37th birthday of the Boy Scouts of America.
Wasn't Ernest Thompson Seton an officer in the Boy Scout organization, Roger?
Yes, he was chief scout for the first 5 years, George. And as a matter of fact, he wrote the first Boy Scout manual. And I might add that even while he was helping the Boy Scout movement get started, Mr. Seton was writing some of the wonderful adventure tales you're going to hear this week, which are true, you know, actual things that he observed and recorded as a naturalist.
Well, they say truth is stranger than fiction.
That's right, George, and I think our adventurers will agree when they hear today's story by Ernest Thompson Seton. It's the story of a horse, and the title is Coalie Bay, Outlaw. Some years ago, in the Bitterroot Mountains of Idaho, there was a beautiful little foal. His coat was bright bay. His legs, mane, and tail were glossy black. Coal black and bright bay, so they named him Coalie Bay. He loved to race like the wind. He gloried in his speed, his tireless legs. And when, careering with a herd of colts, they met a fence or a ditch, it was as natural for Coalie Bay to leap over it as it was for the others to sheer off. Even the kindly curb of the hay yard or stable was unwelcome. And Coalie showed early that he would rather stand out all night in a driving storm than be locked in a comfortable stall without his liberty. He became very clever at dodging the horse wrangler, whose job it was to bring the horse herd to the corral. And each month he became more set on living free, more cunning in the means he took to win his way. When he was 3 years old, just in the perfection of his young strength and beauty, his real troubles began. For now, his owner undertook to break him to ride. He was as tricky and vicious as he was handsome. He snorted and dodged and screamed defiance in the terrible battle. But his owner was skillful. He knew how to apply his power so that all the wild plunging, bucking, rearing, and rolling of the wild one had no result. With all his strength, the young horse was mastered so that a good rider could use him. But each time the saddle went on, he made a new fight and screamed new defiance. For a week, he was ridden each day, and not once did he buck. He had reformed. But the last day, he came home lame. So Coalie Bay was turned out to pasture. 3 days later, he seemed all right. He didn't balk the saddle, but within 5 minutes, he went lame as before. Again, he was turned out to pasture, and after a week, saddled, only to go lame again. His owner didn't know whether Coalie Bay really had a lame leg or was only shamming. But he took the first chance to get rid of him. He sold him for $25. The new owner, a ranchman, felt that he had a bargain, but half a mile from his old home, Coalie Bay went lame, and once again, by a new master, he was turned out to pasture. Now, on one side of the pasture was the garden of a neighbor, such a fine garden that the owner had put a 6-foot fence around it. Yet the very night after Coalie Bay arrived, horses got into the garden and did great damage. Now, this went on for several nights, with the gardener furious, and the ranchman claiming that none of his horses could have done the damage. Meanwhile, Coalie Bay's lameness seemed worse instead of better. Then the ranchman's son saw him walking all right, so he caught him and tried to ride him. At the touch of the saddle, all his old wickedness returned to Coalie Bay. He screamed defiance and threw the boy off at once. The ranchman leaped into the saddle, and Coalie Bay ran backwards for 10 minutes, snorting wildly, and tried to scrape the man off against a post. He reared then and threw his rider, falling backwards himself. But before he could get up, the rancher was in the saddle again. He ran away, plunging and bucking, and then stopped short so that the rancher was flung forward. Coalie Bay turned his head and seized the man's foot in his teeth, while the rider beat him off frantically. There was no question now. It was clear that Coalie Bay was an outlaw, an incurably vicious horse. The saddle was jerked off, and he was driven limping into the pasture. That same night, the raids on the neighboring garden began again, and the two men quarreled over it again. To prove the innocence of his horses, the ranchman asked that the gardener sit up with him and watch. That night, as the moon shone brightly, they saw not all the horses, but Coalie Bay alone, walking straight up to the fence, leap over it, and proceed to gobble the finest things he could find. There was no trace of the limp about Coalie Bay now. He walked leisurely about among the fine vegetables, choosing the best. As soon as the men were sure it was he, they ran forward. Coalie Bay cleared the fence like a deer, lightly raced over the field to mix with the horse herd. And when they came near him, he had, such an awful limp. The rancher threw his hat on the ground.
That settles it. He's a beauty, but he's a fraud, too. Settles who took my garden truck,
Said the other.
well, I suppose so.
The rancher was thoughtful.
Look here, neighbor. You haven't lost more than $10 in vegetables, and that horse is worth $100 easy. Give me 25, take the horse, and call it square.
And thus the thing was settled. The rancher, being a horse trader, said nothing about Coalie Bay being vicious as well as cunning. But the gardener soon found out the very first time he tried to ride him that the horse was as bad as he was beautiful. A few days later, a sign appeared on the gardener's gate. For sale. First-class horse, sound and gentle. Price, $10. Now, it happened that a band of huntsmen came riding by. They were going to hunt bear, and they had guns and everything needed for bear hunting except bait. Now, you may know that it's usual to buy a worthless horse or cow, drive it into the mountains where the bears are, and kill it there. So, seeing the sign, the hunters called to the gardener.
Haven't you got a cheaper horse? Look at him.
The gardener pointed at Coalie Bay.
You won't find a cheaper horse for the money in 1,000 miles. We'll give you $5.
The bear hunter offered, and the deal was closed. As they rode on, the hunters discussed the peculiarities of the outlaw horse. Coalie Bay, as though to emphasize their conversation, limped dreadfully on the trail. Once he tried to go back, but he was easily turned by the man behind him. His limp grew worse until it was really painful to see him.
That limp ain't no fake.
The head guide remarked.
I know horses, and that one's got some deep-seated trouble.
Day after day, the hunters rode further into the mountains, driving the horses along, and Coalie Bay went with the rest, limping and tossing his head and his long, splendid mane at every step. The road grew harder as it rose, and a very bad bog had to be crossed one day. Several horses were mired in it. As the men rushed to the rescue, Coalie Bay saw his chance for escape. He wheeled in a moment and turned himself from a low-headed, limping, sorry, bad-eyed creature into a splendid, high-spirited horse. Head and tail shaking in the wind, he gave a joyous neigh and without a trace of lameness dashed for his home, threading each narrow trail with perfect certainty, though he had seen them only once before. In seconds, he had steamed away from their sight. They were furious, but one of the guides leaped on his horse. He knew the country, and 2 miles away, half a mile by a short cut, was Panther Gap. The runaway must pass through Panther Gap. Coalie Bay came thundering down the trail, skating to a wild turn as he saw the guide waiting. Tossing his head with a scream, he charged back the other way, and in a few moments he was surrounded. Instantly he recovered his monotonous limp and his evil expression. When he was driven into camp, he vented his rage by kicking in the ribs of a harmless little pack horse. They had reached bear country now, and Coalie Bay himself had settled his fate by being caught by a trick. Now he was so wild they dared not even go near him. So 2 of the guides drove him toward a distant glen where bears abounded. Down the long trail to the west they drove him. There was no chance for him to turn aside. He must go on. The men behind him made sure of that. Farther away from his old home on the Bitterroot River, he had gone each time he journeyed. Now he had passed the high divide that leads to the Valley of Bears and on to Salmon River. And he limped sadly now as though he knew. Men behind followed the glossy figure, like hangmen in the death caravan of a nobleman condemned. Down the narrow trail till it opened into a little beaver meadow with rich, rank grass. A mountain stream with winding bear paths up and down the waterside. There they stopped, letting Coalie Bay go ahead. When he was out in the middle of the meadow, one of the men gave a short, sharp whistle. Instantly, Coalie Bay was alert. He turned, noble head erect, nostrils flashing. A shot rang out. The great horse wheeled and dashed away. The marksman had missed. Away he went at his famous best, not homeward this time, but down the unknown western trail, trumpeting his defiance, swinging to the pine woods even as the guide tried to reload. And so he went till the dwindling pines gave place to scrub cedars, and these in turn were mixed with sage, and onward still, till the faraway flat plains of the Salmon River were about him. On and on, tirelessly pounding, through the canyon of the mighty Snake River, and up again to the high, wild plains where the fence is unknown, till moving specks on the far horizon caught his eager eyes. And he lifted up his voice and called to them, the long, bugling neigh of his kindred. And when the night came down on the purpling plain, his place was with the wild herd, as one who, after many a long journey in the dark, has found his home. And so ends our first story by Ernest Thompson Seton, the story of Coalie Bay Outlaw.
And you say that was a true story, Roger?
Oh, yes. Mr. Seton was himself a member of the party of bear hunters which bought Coalie Bay for $10 for bait. Oh, but now I see our time's up, so until tomorrow, so long.
So long, Roger. We'll all be listening tomorrow, same time, same station, for another true story by Ernest Thompson Seton on Mutual's Adventure Parade. Roger Elliott leads the Adventure Parade at this same time over many of these Mutual stations every weekday afternoon, Monday through Friday. Be sure to listen for the world's most famous stories of action, mystery, and adventure on Adventure Parade. Roger Elliott is also your host at the House of Mystery, heard on most of these Mutual stations each Sunday afternoon. Adventure Parade is produced and directed by Robert and Jessica Maxwell. Music is composed and played by John Gart. Ernest Thompson Seton's story for today was adapted for Adventure Parade by Anne Lawrence. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System.
Adventurers, attention! Fall in for Adventure Parade! The Mutual Broadcasting System cordially invites all adventurers from 6 to 60 to join in its parade of the world's most famous stories. Stories of action, mystery, and adventure. And here is your host and storyteller, the leader of Adventure Parade, John Gregg. Thank you, George Hogan, and hello, adventurers. Today is Thanksgiving Day. That's one thing I know. Right, George, you look positively stuffed. I am, even more than the turkey was. Wonderful holiday, Thanksgiving. I agree, but do you know what it means? How's that again? Do you know what Thanksgiving stands for? Oh, yes. The Pilgrims had a big feast at the end of their first year in the colony at Plymouth, Massachusetts, that they were celebrating. That's right, George. The Pilgrims were celebrating the end of a long search. A search for a home where they could think as they pleased, say what they pleased, and worship as they pleased. Originally, you see, the Pilgrims were all English citizens who were forced to flee to Holland because they disagreed with the practices of the Church of England. Here, in the Dutch city of Leyden, they set up homes and shops and secretly printed books preaching freedom of religion, which were smuggled back into England. They then made plans to start a permanent colony in America. And it was the home of William Brewster, who operated the secret printing press in Leyden, that the English spy, known as Squint-Eye, came. Exactly, George. So now let's get on with Chapter 4, transcribed as The Bells of Leyden Sing, by Catherine Coblet. Searching party made its way up to the attic. Andrew darted quickly into his room, a wild, desperate thought rushing through his mind.
If the chest was locked, they'd force it. But if it was wide open, maybe they'll pass it by.
The cocker spaniel, Pompey, greeted Andrew joyfully as he entered his room. Quickly picking up the dog in his arms, Andrew opened the chest at the foot of his bed, pushed aside all but the layer of clothes covering the great iron screw of the printing press, and put Pompey on top.
Now, Pompey, dead. Play dead.
The cocker spaniel looked up at his master for an instant, then lay down flat on his side and let his tongue loll out. Andrew knelt by him, petting.
Boy, where are you? Here, in my room. And we will start here. Open the dresser. Lift the bed apart. You go downstairs, boy. But my dog is sick. He'll frighten him here. I don't worry about dogs. Here now, find anything in this room? Then look in the other room. I'm quite sure the printing press is somewhere in this house.
Harsh voices and heavy boots echoed through the Brewster house on the Steinstein Road until very late that night. But after 2 hours of fruitless labor, the English spy was forced to admit defeat, and with a snarl warning, led his squad of Dutch soldiers off down the canal. Andrew sighed with relief and quickly locked his chest. The house quieted, and the girls, Patience and Fear, slept, while Mistress Brewster stayed awake with Andrew, worrying about Elder Brewster. In the morning, Andrew's friend, Rembrandt Van Ryn, reported that Elder William Brewster had escaped safely through the secret tunnel and was now far beyond the city limits of life.
Israel.
Andrew Brewster burst into the door of Israel's bookshop and slammed it angrily behind him. It had been 9 months since the night the soldiers had searched his house on the Steinstein. 9 months of increasing anxiety for the family, for since that night there had been no word of his father, William Brewster. Could whatever has happened be as serious as you look, Andrew?
Israel, what has happened to my father?
Don't you know that he has reached England?
I don't know any. All winter he did not write us even once. And when I ask whether he's going with us across the sea, my older brother Jonathan shouts and says, "Be quiet." And my mother only wipes her eyes and turns away.
Yeah, it is so.
And there's another thing that bothers me. The Speedwell is being fitted out in the harbor. And all the Dutch sailors on the dock say we're heading into trouble if we use such an old ship to try to get to America.
Oh, a part of Pastor Robinson's congregation is getting ready to sail westward, is it?
Yes. You know that the plans for going to Virginia fell through.
Yeah, but then the Dutch government at The Hague offered to send you to New Amsterdam.
Yes. But just before the agreement was to be signed, a man by the name of Thomas Weston came here from London and put all the Pilgrim families in a dither over a new company called the Merchant Adventurers.
The merchant adventurers.
Yes. They are English businessmen who want to invest in us and send us to America to settle in English colonies. So we can ship goods back to London for them to sell at a profit.
Go on, Andrew.
Well, the other day I heard Weston urging Elder Bradford to settle in Lynn. Bradford says that no one wants to go to that cold, forsaken place. But that's probably where we'll end up, isn't it?
You are discouraged.
I'm worried.
Andrew,
Yes, it is.
did it ever strike you as strange that this Thomas Weston appeared in Leyden just when Pastor Robinson and Elder Bradford were about to accept an offer from the Dutch? Who do you think was in England and spread the news of pilgrim activities here?
You mean it was my father?
Andrew, I can tell you no more. It is not wise for you to know more.
I think I understand.
Then go home and help your mother with the packing. Make the most of your remaining days in Leyden, Andrew. They are numbered.
William's chair went by the first guard, with the table and the cabinet, a nice spinning wheel. Oh, the silverware. Jonathan, put those candlesticks with the silver. Now, where shall I put those green cushions? Andrew!
Yes, Mother.
Andrew, are you sure your turkey tax closed? I've never looked at it.
Oh, yes, it's all packed, Mother.
Just the same, bring me the key, and let's see whether we can repack it and make room for these green cushions.
But, Mother, I tell you it's full.
Please do as I say, Andrew. The speedwell must be loaded by tomorrow.
The shadow of a frown crossed Andrew's face. He knew his mother would never allow him to keep the iron screw from the printing press in his chest. All that extra poundage, she would say, for a boy's fancy.
Andrew, I want the key to your chest.
He reached in his pocket for the key, and then his heart jumped with thankfulness. The key was not there. Instead, there was a small hole.
I can't find it, Mother.
Well, look for it then.
There's a hole in my pocket. It must have fallen out.
I declare, Andrew, sometimes I think you will never grow up. I suppose you'll have to get the lock. Yes? Enter.
Well, good day, Mrs. Suspense, Andrew.
Elder Bradford. Come in, come in.
Well, the packing is almost completed. I see you're ready for the trip to England.
Yes. Jonathan and the girls are sorting the things we don't need, such as William's book.
William's book? We must take them, Mrs. Brewster. They are food for the spirit.
And what will we women have to feed the body if you take up room on the speedwell with books?
Provisions are being purchased for us in England by Master Weston of the Merchant Adventurers Company.
Aye. And after Weston has lined his own pockets, he'll buy precious little food. And I understand no butter goes. You men have decided butter is a luxury, and that we can get along with marrow from the bones of wild beasts.
Perhaps, Mrs. Brewster, if the money holds out, some London butter might...
London butter. Stale and smelling to high heaven. And here we are in Leyden, where the best butter in all the world is. Elder Bradford,
Yes, Mrs. Brewster.
you want William's books aboard.
Without saying.
Then I'll pack them when I know that at least 80 tubs of Leyden's best butter and cheese are stored in the hold of the speedwell.
But
Books for butter, sir. That is my final word.
as Andrew had expected, his mother won the argument, and the butter was stored aboard the next day, along with his chest containing the precious iron screw, which Mistress Brewster must have forgotten to check. 2 days later, at the high dike gate, those pilgrims who were to sail on the speedwell were loaded on a barge. Jonathan, Patience, and Thea Brewster were to wait for the next trip a year later. So they stood on shore, waving to their mother and Andrew, who were soon sweeping under the south gate of the city. For the last time, Andrew heard the ringing of the university bell. And just as the barge moved out into the harbor, he saw more people join his brother and sisters, all waving goodbye. There was Professor Polyander in his great cloak, and Israel, the bookseller, in a cape beside him. Andrew looked and looked, as though he could never see enough of the walled city. How beautiful its towers were, how many and fine its churches. Suddenly he hugged Pompey close, and buried his face in the dog silk black coat.
Andrew. Andrew, isn't that your friend on the wall? There?
Andrew looked up. There by the dike gate was chubby Rembrandt Van Ryn, upside down, his legs spreading back and forth like a jumping jack. He was turning cartwheels and waving goodbye to his friends. Everyone aboard the barge laughed. The antics of the Dutch boy seemed to break the nervous tension.
And bless Leyden. It's the best city in the whole world.
And we can prove it, too, Mother. For we have lived here.
Chapter 4, transcribed of Catherine Copeland's story, The Bells of Leyden Sing. John, I have a question. Yes, George? Well, something's a little confusing. The Pilgrims came to America on the Mayflower, not on this other ship. The Speedwell, you mean? Mm-hmm. Now, what happened to the Speedwell, and when does the Mayflower come in? Tomorrow, George, when we hear the very exciting climax of our story. Till then, so long. So long, John. We'll all be listening tomorrow, same time, same station, for the fifth and final chapter of The Bells of Leyden Sing on Mutual's Adventure Parade. The Bells of Leyden Sing was adapted for Adventure Parade by permission of Longman, Green and Company. Adventurers, attention! Fall in for Adventure Parade! The Mutual Broadcasting System cordially invites all adventurers from 6 to 60 to join in its parade of the world's most famous stories. Stories of action, mystery, and adventure. And here is your host and storyteller, the leader of Adventure Parade, John Gray. Thank you, George Hogan, and hello, adventurers. Our story this week is about a group of pilgrims who sought refuge from religious persecution in Leyden, Holland, and then set sail for England in the Speedwell, where they would join in their voyage to America by another ship, the Mayflower. Now back to Southampton Harbor in autumn of the year 1620 for the final transcribed chapter of The Bells of Leyden Sing. Both outside and in. Yet Andrew Brewster, crouched on a berth in one end of the main cabin of the Mayflower, to which he and his mother had been assigned, decided that storm or no storm, he would have to go ashore and find out what had happened to his father. Andrew had been so busy with his own thoughts and fears that he had paid little attention to the angry quarrel going on in the cabin. But now men's voices were raised in bitterness, and Pastor Robinson faced the agent of the Merchant Adventurers Company. You have tricked us with your policy, Pastor. You had no idea of helping us. You've only been thinking of yourselves. Weston, you have plotted against us and agreed to conditions which will make us slaves for years, bonded servants instead of free men. Thomas Weston, agent for the Merchant Adventurers Company, who was to finance the Pilgrims' new settlement, stood up.
I
Master Robinson. Had I not agreed to these conditions as your agent, I would not have this money for you now. We don't want money that will make us slaves, Weston. We've come this far. We've sold all our property to buy the Mayflower and the Speedwell, and we'd sooner sail with no provision than be helped under your conditions. Very well, if that's your answer. So let it be. From this hour on, you stand on your own legs. I have had enough of you Bible-thumping psalm singers.
Weston turned and flung himself out of the cabin, and Andrew took the opportunity to slip out behind him. On deck, the wind and rain swept through the dripping rigging that drenched them both. Weston paused when he reached the edge of the gangplank.
Aye, that'll give them something to think about. Where will they get their harbor charges now?
Harbor charges?
Huh? Yes, sir. 100 pounds these pilgrims owe for 10 days they've anchored here. They don't have 100 pennies in their pockets. Well, I'm through with the lot of them.
They're good people, Mr. Weston.
You say that because you're one of them. But for me, they've been nothing but complainers.
They don't like the Mayflower. They don't like the food from London.
And they don't like the settlers the merchant company wants to send along with them. Well, let them then take over their own planning and see how they like that.
Then we need 100 pounds before we can sail?
Hi, 100 pounds. And you can add 10 more pounds to that for every day it takes them to figure out where the money's coming from. 100 pounds. To think that after all our trials, our voyage should be stopped by this.
Master Robinson.
Yes? Who's there?
It's Andrew Brewster, sir. I'm over by the gangway.
You ought to be in your bunk this time of night, Andrew.
I was waiting here. I thought perhaps my father would come.
Oh, I see.
We won't sail without him, will we, Pastor?
Well, you know, there's a price on William Brewster's headland. King James wants him taken in connection with certain books printed in Holland.
I know.
The books which won us so much sympathy.
Pastor, where's my father now?
Andrew, there's a second mate coming aboard in the morning. He may be able to tell you something about it.
Are we going to sail tomorrow?
The question is, are we going to sail at all? I'll not sign papers that will make us slaves once we got to America. And yet 100 pounds. 110 by dawn.
Isn't there something aboard the ships we could sell?
What? Our clothes, our furniture, our tools? We cannot go barehanded into the wilderness.
What about my father's books? Mother didn't want to take them along, but Elder Bradford did.
The books are aboard?
Yes. Mother made a bargain with Elder Bradford. 80 tubs of butter and cheese from Leyden, she said. You put 80 tubs aboard, or I won't pack the books.
80 tubs of fresh Leyden butter, each one worth 2 pounds. Andrew Brewster, Andrew, my thanks to you, lad.
Pastor Robinson, you're not going to sell the butter.
Of course, lad. It was a splendid idea.
But what will Mother say?
The next morning, 55 tubs of butter and cheese were unloaded from the Mayflower and the Speedwell and carted off to Southampton Market. Everything was in readiness to set sail, and when a swarthy sailor with a long black mustache darted past the King's Guard up the gangway, Pastor Robinson gave the signal.
Up anchor, Captain Jones. Our second mate's arrived. Up anchor.
Pastor Robinson,
What is it, Andrew?
you said there'd be news of my father before we sail.
There is all the news you need, lad. Don't let grease paint and the false mustache fool you.
I don't understand.
Look, over there. Our new second mate, waving to you.
The passage to America was still not meant to be smooth for the Pilgrims. Once and then a second time, after leaving Southampton, the Speedwell signaled distress, and they were forced to turn about and land on English shores again. Then at last the Mayflower set sail alone, with somehow or other a goodly number of the Speedwell's passengers and gear crowded into her. The ship's hold was not large enough for the baggage. It was everywhere. Andrew's own chest was lashed in a dark space between decks at the end of a passage, and here he often made his bed. In good weather it was pleasant, but when the weather was bad, the chicken coops were piled nearby, and the hot, wet animal odors made the air sicken. The weather, for the most part, was stormy, almost from the beginning.
Cold porridge, a pickled egg, a little Holland cheese, and a snatch of half-cooked bacon, a hunk of cold cabbage, and a cold turnip was all the food allotted to each person per day. There was no butter, of course. Precious few tubs remained, and these were being hoarded for the new world. Pangs of hunger, accompanied by fits of nervous temper, grew steadily worse, like the seas and the driving wind. Halfway across, the real difficulties began. The wind blew from every corner of the heavens, and crossboards struck. The waves battered and rammed the deck. None of the passengers were allowed outside. The portholes were kept closed. One sailor died and was buried at sea. And after the funeral, Andrew sensed a kind of fear beginning to steal over the crew. One bitter cold afternoon, a wave swept up and over the whole length of the ship, and water suddenly leaped down on the hapless passengers crowded in the cabin. The ship rolled and creaked, and with a sound like a cannon shot, there came a sinister cracking.
Captain Jones, the beam in the main cabin is splitting.
Captain Jones rushed in to see the damage.
A good post set firm on the floor here is what that beam needs. If we had an iron jack of some kind, we might spring the beam back into place.
What else Captain Jones said, Andrew never heard, for he was running down the companionway to get his chest, but it was wedged fast and tied with innumerable knots.
Help me, somebody, please.
Oh, dear! And the ship's breaking in two above us. Are you daft, lad?
The sailors would pay no attention to the frantic boy, but suddenly Andrew saw the swarthy second mate.
Help me, Father, please, help me.
Yes. What is it, Andrew?
I'm trying to get the screw of the printing press. I brought it, and we can use it to brace the main beam.
The screw? The great screw, Andrew?
Yes, Father.
Oh, thank God.
Oh, there, sailors!
Aye, sir.
Lend a hand here and make haste.
The screw of the Brewster press was in place. Set firm on wooden blocks, it held the beam above it in position. But for how long it would hold, no one knew. The Pilgrims were for going on. Captain Jones, although he didn't oppose their plans, did not fail to advise them of their danger.
This screw that's holding the beam, it looks like a good one.
It is, sir. I saw them cast it, of the best Leyden iron.
Well, it seems we must take your word for it, lad. However, if we go on, it'll have to stay where it is. Or we'll not be able to fashion another beam in America. It will have to stay for the voyage back to England.
Then it must be so. The screw is yours, Captain Jones. Somehow, some way, I'll find another printing press.
Andrew looked at the great iron screw where it stood in the shadow of the heavy block, then stumbled outside with his dog Pompey trooping at his heels. The sailors were going about their business, for the captain had given them their orders, and Andrew could see the torn sails being replaced with new ones. The wind pushed at the snapping canvas. White water began to foam at the ship's stern. The Mayflower continued to sail west. Andrew picked up Pompey and held his warm body, first against one of his cold ears and then against the other, trying to stop the ringing in them caused by the bitter air.
It must be my imagination, Pompey, but I can almost hear the bells of Leyden singing. They must be ringing now over the city. Israel, the bookseller, hears them. Rembrandt does. Professor Polyender. Even old Squint Eye, if he's there, too. Pompey, I think I'll always hear them in my memory.
The Bells of Leyden sing, transcribed by Catherine Coblet.
The Pilgrims really had a tough time of it, didn't they?
Yes, George. They had to fight for what they wanted. Freedom of speech and worship, both of which are worth fighting for. Now about next week.
I was just going to ask you what we're doing.
Well, next week we're doing the exciting story of a man who carried a message through the enemy's ranks under constant fire. It's Michael Strogoff by Jules Verne. Now till Monday,
So long.
So long, John. We'll all be listening Monday. Same time, same station. For Chapter 1 of Michael Strogoff by Jules Verne on Mutual's Adventure Parade. Adventure Parade is produced and directed by Robert and Jessica Maxwell. Music is composed and played by John Garth. The Bells of Leyden Sing was adapted for Adventure Parade by permission of Longman, Green and Company.